Good morning, everyone. My name is Sonja Holtz. I am the Palomar Dean, which is the first vice president of the Palomar District. Welcome to our room. Today, we're going to talk about women's history, which is one of our narrative categories. Also something that GFWC commissions us to talk about, to enjoy, and embrace. Today, we have a very special guest, a dear friend of mine. Her name is Debbie Pietraszko, and she is a storyteller. She loves to tell the stories of women, and I'm so excited to have her in the room. Welcome, Debbie.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. Yes, I love women's history. The it's Women's History Advancement Area is really designed to educate and inspire members and potential members to explore the rich historical history of women. I am a women's history chairman at both my club and my district. Well, I had to give up district this year, but I was in club. I try never to repeat the same story. In fact, I have a list, this two-sided, of all the reports I've done. My goal is to present at each meeting the story of a woman who has made significant contributions to society. These are either little known stories of widely known women or stories of little known women who've not been properly credited for their contributions. And I'm restricted to 3 minutes, so I can't go on forever. But
Wait,
we're
who told you
talking
that?
about,
Oh,
yeah, that's my club. My club does
oh, your
this.
club.
But we're talking about scientists who didn't get credit for their discoveries. Actually, a couple of Hollywood personalities, one of which I think I will be telling you about. Sometimes there's a story in here about the woman who actually invented Monopoly. She came up with the idea of Monopoly first. I'm not going to tell that story today. I have several sources for the stories that I tell, and I get them from women's history websites, from Facebook, from books I've read, and even Jeopardy. Whenever there's a Jeopardy question that involves a woman, I immediately write her name down and then I look her up, and she sometimes begins a story. So I thought I would give you two of the reports that I've done. They're One of them is absolutely my favorite. I have some favorites, but this is one of them. This is about Lucille Ball and science fiction. Many of my friends and club know that I really like science fiction, especially Star Trek. And did you know that without I Love Lucy and the Lucy Show, Star Trek, the most powerful of all science fiction series, would never have existed? And we owe that to Lucille Ball and Desilu Studios. There are three reasons why we credit Lucy with bringing Star Trek to the screen. After her divorce from Desi in 1960, she made another sitcom that followed I Love Lucy. It was called The Lucy Show. And although both shows were filmed at Desilu, Lucy didn't have another show that Desilu owned outright. And she was looking for something that Desilu would actually own. And when a producer came to Lucy with Star Trek, she saw that opportunity. The second reason that we give her credit is that part of her foresight in popularizing Star Trek was connected to the fact that she and Desi had pioneered the concept of reruns with I Love Lucy. Before I Love Lucy, the creators of the before I Love Lucy, the idea that creators could monetize reruns of TV shows was unheard of. What Lucy wanted from her producers at Desilu was, quote, bring me a show that can run as long as I Love Lucy, end quote, because they were getting money for it. And although Star Trek, the original, was canceled after only 3 seasons, it's still running today and they're still getting residuals. And then thirdly, even though Lucy wasn't involved in the creative side of Star Trek, she was pivotal in the financing. In early 1964, Gene Roddenberry presented a brief treatment to Desilu for a series, calling it a wagon train to the stars. What an interesting title. She was instrumental in approving the production, which was pitched to NBC. NBC made the pilot, it was called The Cage, but then they rejected the series. What makes Lucille Ball's support of Trek so unusually historic, financed a second pilot called Where No Man Has Gone after it was rejected outright. She paid for the second pilot. As one of the actors in Star Trek Next Generation says, quote, Lucy was only too happy to put her money where her famous mouth was, end quote. The idea that Desilu Studios would put up money for a second pilot was unheard of in 1965. In the 50 years since the inception of Star Trek, it has spawned 5 or 6 other series and about 14 movies. Without the bravery and determination of Lucille Ball, who defied Hollywood expectations, well, Star Trek probably wouldn't exist at all. And as a die-hard Star Trek fan, I say, thank you, Lucille Ball. Without Lucy, there would be no Star Trek. That's one of my reports. Actually, I have a third one that I might read part of. This report was, then I did a report on a woman that I had never heard of. And maybe you have. Her name was Fanny Farmer. Raise your hand if you've heard of Fanny Farmer. Raise your hand. Well, there's 1 or 2 of you who know who Fanny Farmer is. I had never heard of her. She was born in March of 1857 in Boston, the oldest of 5 daughters, born in a family that highly valued education and that expected young Fanny to go to college. But after high school graduation, she suffered a stroke. After high school graduation, she suffered a stroke. Can you imagine that? It left her paralyzed. The doctor discouraged all thoughts of further schooling. She was unable to get out of bed for months and remained in her parents' care at home, where she was an invalid for years. She did, however, eventually learn to use her legs and walk, but she always retained a limp. While at home, Fanny helped around the house, took up cooking, and eventually helped her mother turn her mother's home into a boarding house that developed a reputation for the quality of meals it served. At the age of 30, she enrolled in the Boston Cooking School, where her performance was outstanding. She trained at the school until 1889 during the height of the domestic science movement, learning what was then considered the most critical elements of domestic science, including nutrition and diet for the well, convalescent cookery, techniques of cleaning and sanitation, chemical analysis of food, techniques of cooking and baking. In 1891, she took the position of that school principal, which she held for 11 years. After her resignation in 1902, she established her own school. It was decidedly creative and innovative, emphasizing the practice of cooking rather than theory. Its program was designed to educate housewives rather than to prepare teachers. And the school also developed cooking equipment for the sick and physically disabled. She became a highly respected authority in the field and was invited to deliver lectures to nurses, women's clubs, and even the Harvard Business School. She expected to be remembered chiefly for her work in those areas, but she was wrong. Recipes in the 19th century, cookbooks relied on measurements like a handful of rice, a piece of butter the size of an egg, or a goodly amount of molasses, on the assumption that women already knew how to cook. Fanny Farmer changed that. Widely credited with inventing the modern recipe, Fanny was the first professional cook to insist that scientific methods and precise measurements produce better food. Those measurements were things like a level teaspoon, a level tablespoon, level cups, and measured ounces. She once wrote that corrective measurements are absolutely necessary to ensure the best results. She was responsible for the Boston Cooking School cookbook, published first under her name in 1896. It was a bestseller and still remains in print today. It has sold more than 7 million copies. Although the book's publisher did not predict good sales and limited the first edition to 3,000 copies published at the author's expense, which means she even paid for it. But it made farmer Fanny a primary source for a generation of American cooks. Julia Child, the only American cooks to become as widely influential as Fanny, said that Fanny's cookbook was the primary reference in her own mother's kitchen and that she cut her teeth on it as a cook, on its pancakes, popovers, and fudge recipes. Both women were famous as teachers and writers, not as brilliant cooks. They were considered unusual in their time. Both were ambitious, charismatic media titans, surveyors of domestic wisdom who led unconventional domestic lives and privileged women from the old New England families with a strong sense of how things should be done. Fanny Farmer was a woman of unusual motivation, intelligence, and courage, and though she suffered another paralytic stroke later in life, she continued lecturing. During the last 7 years of her life, Fanny used a wheelchair, but she continued to lecture. She died in January 1915 at the age of 57. She helped bring cooking into the modern age, and for that, we thank her. Fanny Farmer. And then just to show you that it doesn't have to necessarily be a person, I'm only going to read a couple of paragraphs of this unless you really want me to. So I started by saying today is a different kind of women's history report. I'm not going to tell you about one woman, but about many women, hundreds of women. At the onset of World War I, several factories were established across the United States to produce watches and military dials painted with material containing radium, a radioactive element that glows in the dark. Hundreds of young women were hired for the well-paying jobs painting the dials with this substance. The job was a trendy new position for young American and Canadian women. It was artistic and well paid. In fact, they were paid up to 3 times the amount they'd be earning in other factories. And because the dials were for military use, the women were made to feel important. They were making a difference with the war effort. And by the way, many of these young women were 15, 16, and 17 years old. The women hired to paint the dials became known as ghost girls because the radium dust to which they were exposed daily made their hair, clothes, and skin literally glow in the dark. Many of the women wore their best dresses on the job so the fabric would shine brightly when they were dancing after work. Some even applied the paint to their teeth because it gave them a radiant smile, and to their fingertips. They didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
What's more, the painters ingested the radioactive substance as part of their job because I don't think I might have something I could use. Because some of the dials to which they worked were extremely small, they were instructed to use their lips to paint the brushes like this to get them to a fine point to paint the dials. Lip, dip, and paint. When they asked about the radium safety, they were assured by their managers that they had nothing to worry about. And of course, that wasn't true. It wasn't long before the radium girls began to experience the physical ravages of their exposure. Among the first was a woman named Molly who painted watches for a company in Orange, New Jersey. Her first symptom was a toothache, which required the removal of the tooth. Soon the tooth next to it also had to be extracted. Painful ulcers, bleeding, and full of pus developed where the teeth had been. The mysterious malady spread throughout Molly's body and lower jaw, which had to be removed, then into other parts of her body. She died in September of 1922 of a massive hemorrhage. Doctors were puzzled as to the cause of her condition, and oddly, they determined that she had died of syphilis. In growing numbers, the other radium girls became deathly ill, experiencing many of the same symptoms as Molly, and for 2 years, their employers vociferously denied any connection between the girls' work and their death. The company finally commissioned an independent study of the matter, which concluded that the painters had died from the effects of radium exposure. But refusing to accept the report's findings, the company commissioned additional studies that came to an opposite conclusion, and it publicly belittled the girls who had taken ill. The public continued to assume that radium was safe, but the girls continued to get sick. In 1925, a pathologist named Harrison Martland developed a test that proved conclusively that radium had poisoned the watch painters by destroying their bodies from the inside. Many knew that their days were numbered. They wanted to do something to help their colleagues still working with deadly substance. In 1927, an attorney agreed to accept their case, and many of the watch painters had just months to live and were forced to accept an out-of-court settlement. Still, their experiences made the issue of radium safety a front-page story across the world. But even then, the company they worked for denied its role, and the women continued to get sick and die. It wasn't until 1938 when a dying radium worker named Catherine Wolfe Donahue successfully sued the radium dial company over her illness that the issue was finally solved and settled. The legacy of the Radium Girls cannot be understated. Their cause led to the broadening of diseases and illnesses covered by workers' compensation. Their case is responsible for the health and safety of employees and led to a variety of reforms, as well as the creation of the U.S. Occupational Health and Safety Administration. They were instructed in proper safety and provided with protective gear. In particular, they no longer, after OSHA got involved, they no longer painted brushes by lips and avoided ingesting or breathing the paint. Radium paint was still used in dials as late as the 1970s. They play the Radium Girls hold an important health, physics, and labor rights. The right of individual workers to sue for racial labor abuse was established as a result of this case. In the wake of the case, industrial safety standards were enhanced. And in 1963, perhaps at least partly in response to the research that was done, President Kennedy signed the International Limited Test Ban Treaty, which prohibited atomic tests above ground, underwater, and in space. One of the girls, this is in pencil, I have a hard time reading it. One of the girls said that she hoped that what she went through would prevent others from going through this. The Radium Girls did not die in vain. Although they could not save themselves from the poison that riddled their bodies, in countless ways, their sacrifice saved many lives of many others, the Radium Girls. But that was interesting. I'm done.
That's very interesting. Wow, girl. There's a movie out about that, isn't there? Does anyone remember the movie? Have anyone seen that movie? Because it's actually very well done about the Radium Girls. Yeah. Have you watched it? It's sad, but it's a really good depiction of what they went through and then how they solved it and how some of the girls got through it.
So really all of these stories without the women who did what they did. I mean, imagine if you were still cooking with a slice of butter a hunk of butter the size of an egg, or a fistful of salt. Imagine what that food must have tasted like. And the Radium Girls, I mean, they'd still be painting those things. They'd still be using radium in all kinds of strange places if they hadn't had to sacrifice their lives to get that changed. God bless them all.
Yeah, well, thank you, Debbie, for being here today, and thank you for presenting. So I have something fun for us to do. Are you guys ready? All right, here we go. How much do you know? So we have a quiz today, and it's about, do you know who notable women are? So when I'm teaching you how to turn this around and put it into your clubs, I really want to give you tools of things that you can actually apply to whatever setting you're in to make them understand how important this role is as telling our history and knowing who the people of our women are in history. So does anyone recognize anyone? Let's see if we can go forward. All right, guess who? Read the clue on the page and then decide which women is the correct answer. Check your answer on the following slide. It's like I'm teaching high school all over again. So this notable woman was a Polish. No, don't get your phones out. That's not fair. All right.
I know who this one is.
Oh, Debbie. This notable woman was a Polish researcher who conducted groundbreaking research. She was the most famous for her work with radioactivity. See if I can. Jane Goodall, Marie Curie, Rosa Parks, or Bessie Coleman. Does anyone know? Raise your hand if you know. Does anyone know?
Figure out where to put them.
I do. It's Marie Curie.
Absolutely.
Oh, let's check. Yes, good job, everyone. Okay, next one. This notable woman was a seamstress. She refused to give up her bus seat. Oh, we already know who that is.
We know that is, yeah.
To a white man. Her arrest led to the Montgomery bus boycott. Does everyone know who it is?
Oh, yeah.
Rosa Parks.
Yes. This notable woman was a part of the Shoshone tribe. She helped the Lewis and Clark expedition from 1804 to 1806.
Sacagawea.
Sacagawea.
Good job, everyone. All right. This notable woman is an education advocate for girls in her country, Pakistan. She is the youngest winner of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Malala.
Good job, you guys. This notable woman was the first pilot of African American and Native
Bessie Coleman.
Bessie Coleman.
Good job, you guys. This notable woman was one of the most visible leaders for the women's suffrage movement. She championed for women's rights of voting, equal pay for equal work, and abolition.
Susan Anthony.
Right? These are too obvious. I have to make them harder for you guys. This
Jane
notable
Goodall.
woman is considered to be the world's
Yes.
most knowledgeable expert on chimpanzees. She spent
Jane
2 years
Goodall.
living amongst a troop of chimpanzees in the wild.
Jane Goodall.
This notable woman is a political leader in Burma and is a major reason that partial democracy exists in Burma. She has been the secretary for the National League for Democracy since its beginning.
Aung San Suu Kyi.
Yeah.
Good job, you guys.
Right.
Look
So-
at these. Look at how amazing these women are.
What happened to their noses?
Yeah, I know.
Now, why are their noses all pink? It's funny how people do Canva, right? Okay, so I'll put this up in your thing. Now, again, you guys knew all the answers, but it's a great way just to remember these women and the great things that they did, right? So then, does anyone have a notable woman that they'd like to bring to the table? Who are some of the women that you know that you have led in really amazing ways? Come on, guys. Everyone knows one. Yes, Rose.
No, I just trying to
Oh.
think. I haven't had coffee
Well,
yet, so I'm like,
okay.
I'll
I
throw
think these lessons are going to have to come with Starbucks cards, right?
yeah. I'll throw another name out there.
Okay, go for it.
Her name was because she's Polish. So what can I say? Her name was Stephanie Louise Kowalek. And she's working for DuPont, working at creating threads that were really strong. And it's I won't. There's a whole long story about her, but the point is that the thread that she was able to spin, following DuPont's kind of direction of what they were looking for, in terms of how she spun them, led to something called yellow Kevlar fiber.
Oh,
And guess what they use Kevlar fiber for? Kevlar vests.
right.
So
Yes.
really the material that goes to make up Kevlar vests that stop bullets, help to stop the bullets, was the method of creating that fiber was created by a woman. Who ever heard of her? Stephanie Louise Kowalek.
Yep. And there's new people that we can talk about. You know, there's a lot of women making a difference in this world. Yes, Kathy, please.
I have an older woman that I had never heard of before until I went to a lecture at the museum, and her name is Dorothea Dick.
Mm-hmm.
And she was an educator, reformer, and activist. I've got Sonja's talking today, who fought for medical field changes and championed the mentally ill and indigenous populations. Through lobbying Congress and state legislatures, Dix was instrumental in establishing the first American mental asylums, founding or expanding over 30 hospitals, and she was a leader in challenging the notion that people with mental illnesses couldn't be helped. She was during the American Civil War, was her time period. She also set guidelines for nurses, and apparently, from what I learned at the museum lecture, she was quite the disciplinarian, and she was very steadfast in her rules, and it had to be this way. And she was just an amazing woman, and I never knew about her until the museum lecture.
Thank you for sharing, everyone. So now you kind of get the idea why GFWC wants us to focus on the women in our clubs and districts.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and show you what they're commissioning us to
On
do.
a Zoom meeting.
Okay, let me mute her. All right, here we go. So this is what GFWC asks us to do. They really dig into women's history. They have something called the WHRC, which is the Women's History and Resource Center. Now, the 24-20, this is what I tell you when I tell the deans, there's always an emphasis every 2 years that they're asking you to look for in your reports. And I get this confused look, but they literally put it at the top of every one of their worksheets. So the emphasis for this 2 years in WHRC is to educate members and others about GFWC's history and impact and the historical contributions of others, to engage community leaders and citizens in projects and programs that document GFWC and local history, restore and preserve historic buildings and artifacts that honor and celebrate GFWC individual and community achievements. And then to empower GFWC and community members in a collaborative effort to create a better future. So they write these are all at the GFWC in their digital library in the club manual. Anyone that's a member, you have access to this, permission to use it, permission to print it, permission to tear it apart and use it in a PowerPoint. This is yours as a club member. So it says here, since the Federation founding in 1890, GFWC members have understood the historic, significant, or the organization's member to improve communities through volunteer service. We all know that. So what do they want us to do? So this is the next thing that they do that's kind of cool. When we send in our reports to the GFWC, they take what the state chairman suggests, the top 10 projects that every single chairman puts to them, and they pick the top projects out of that, and they publish them to news and notes, and they also publish them to these worksheets. This is why when I ask you to rewrite it, it's not being difficult. I'm just telling you, give your top projects the best billing so that the state chairman can find it and then GFWC can find it. Does that make sense? It does, doesn't it? Okay, so these are things that they are doing. So this month is Black History Month. And if you want, there are a lot of wonderful postings about Black History Month. And there's a lot of incredible Black women that have done incredible things across the world. And if we could put that out on our social media and give it exposure, it would make us stronger. So this is Black History Month. Next month is Women's History Month. So then they also pulled forward, see how they pull in what club it is. It was all about a veteran flag project. And then they did something here where they celebrated with a quiz on family. It's nothing that amazing. You guys are doing this. You just need to get noticed by the way you write them. All right. So then they found a unique way about learning about women in history and then gravesite care. So that was last year. So here's what they'd like us to do. Project ideas. Who has a project that you'd like to talk about for women's history? Everyone has women's history. Does anyone have a women's history chairman in your club? Right? We're losing them, aren't we? So now we have to figure out how to get them back. And the most important thing we can do for our clubs and our districts and our state is to tell our stories. So they are giving us ideas on projects here, but they're actually commissioning us to go one step forward. So let me find that for you. They're asking us to find a way to tell our stories. Does anyone understand what that might mean? Right? So here in the handouts that I'm going to give you today, there are 2 different ways that they're asking us to focus on this. And you guys, don't make this hard. Just, so have you ever, how many of you still have your mothers? I still have my mother, but she's 92. And think about the conversations that you have with your mom. Think about the conversations you had when you were a child. I lost my sister really young, and that was tough because I didn't get a chance to ask her all these questions before she passed. So think about the women. Think about you. You are making history. Why not tell your story? I think we're forgetting our commission, and we need to stop this. We need to start telling our stories again. So they're asking us to do a recorded oral history. Now, don't make it difficult. It doesn't have to be anything weird or spectacular. I do have some talented teenagers if you want to borrow them. They seem to take videos constantly. Okay, so here's what they're asking you to do. Did I freeze? I think I might.
No.
No, you're fine. No,
Okay.
you're fine.
I live in the country, you guys. My Wi-Fi is always at the bequest of how it's going to work that day. Okay, so oral history. What does anyone think this oral history might include? What could we do to do this with our clubs? Come on, guys. We know what to do. It's just, are we, it puts you in a vulnerable place to be on camera or have your voice recorded. But think about everything. Let's take, for example, Abby. Abby, you have gone through quite a few different positions, and you have made a lot of things in your district or your club that have made a big difference to us as a CFWC, correct? Wouldn't it be powerful if you sat with your best friend and did a chat on like either, it doesn't have to be video, it could just be a recording, and then just tuck it away for the history of your district so that in 25 years, they know the things that we accomplished in these chairs. We're not bragging. We're really not. It's not about bragging. It's about making sure that our grandchildren or those new people in, oh my goodness, I think the kids that are in kindergarten right now are graduating like in 2045. When those kids come into these chairs, that they have some idea of what we did, right? Does that make sense? It does make sense. So what does that look like? So it says here, it says, you know, a tape recorder should be fine, but you could use your phone now. Your phone is such a valuable tool. So then it gives you background research. It says good preparation for an oral history includes researching the interviewee's background. So here's what I'm going to commission you guys to do, and this will be a fun project. Find the person in your club that has the most years. Some of our people have 50 years. Some of our people have 30 years. Make it your commission in the next 3 months to sit down and tell their history. Make a series of 10 questions, and it can be as simple as, what was club like when you started? Tell us about your favorite features of club when you started. What are, like, we have this one woman, and this is something that I want to do with her. Her name is Sylvia, and she's like this incredible human being. And she used to be the San Marcos president for 2 terms. We don't have that club anymore, and it went out quite a while ago, but she is always supportive of us. And she's probably in her late 80s, and it's time for me to sit with her, isn't it? So I'm going to do this also with Sylvia. So find someone that you can do this for in the next 3 months. And then it says you want a brief personal background. Okay, we got that. How did you learn about GFWC? How were you brought into club? Describe some of the programs and activities that you participated in when you were 10 years in, 15 years in. Name something that you led or changed. Do you believe your activities made an impact on anyone else or a club? And all of us make that impact. How is your life as a woman different from those lives of men during your time in GFWC? Wow, powerful question. So I will send this to you. I commission you just to follow it exactly like it is. It gives you everything that you need to do. And then let's get together in about 3 months and tell each other the stories. And then let's put them out there. Let's put them into print. The other thing I want to mention is we often forget about Jennie June. Let's not forget about Jennie June. Let's make Jennie June something that we do every single year. So who can tell me what, Debbie, you probably know what Jennie June is. Does anyone in the room have a good idea of what Jennie June is?
She was the founder.
Right. And so we created an award where we give women that have done great things in our clubs and our districts an award, but it's not only for women that are doing great things in our clubs. It's someone that's serving the community as a whole. So it's someone that's all, look, the one thing about if you have the volunteer spirit, you're not just working in club. You're serving Meals on Wheels, and you're working at the library, and you serve at a school as a reader, and you go to church and you do all these things at church. Find that one person every year and write it up. Make a difference. Write it up. Those are our history. That's our women. We want to honor them. And you guys, when you go to GFWC convention and those 4 women are brought up on stage, they are literally honored beyond anything you can imagine. And we need to do that in our section of the world. Okay, so find a way to make that. And I can send that paperwork for you today too. Okay.
Mhm.
There's one. Rosalia, did you have a comment?
Yes, I wanted to share that at the district level,
Of course.
Palomar,
Of
we
course.
do have a Women's History Resource Center chairman. She's an active chairman, and that's Doc Hensel. And there's a form that she sends out every year asking the clubs to participate in sharing the women's history at our district convention. And part of that is they can put up posters or they can have handouts, whatever they like to do. So at our district convention, we have been setting up an her for display purposes. That way the clubs can come, and then she has a contest as well.
Cool.
But the more important thing is that she would like to have the sharing of that information among all the clubs. So that could be an idea for the districts as well. And if you have them at your club meetings, you may have prospective members that are going to be attending your meetings, and they can see the history of your club. And this is something that Doc is trying to work really hard at promoting. Just thought I would share that information with you.
That's wonderful.
Right.
Thank you so much, Rosalia. That's wonderful. Yes, Debbie.
And I would encourage that. I was thinking about whether I would mention this or not. This would be a slightly longer project, just because it's time consuming. But one of the things I did at my club is 97 years old. Needless to say, we don't have any members who have been around since 1926 or whatever year that was. I pulled out records. I pulled out the minutes because, you're supposed to save club minutes like forever. I went and pulled out the original minutes were handwritten on paper, on lined paper. I read through those minutes. I made notes based on a year. And then I put together a story. So because it's really time consuming, I've only come up to the 1960s, but I was able to then give a report, sort of taking all these little tiny tidbits of information I learned from the minutes and put together in a story of what we did in the 1920s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, which is as far as I've gotten. And you know what? And I've done that story twice, because I did it about 4 or 5 years ago. And we've got such a turnover in our membership, not toner, but a whole lot of new people. They are fascinated by the things that we did, the things that our club was responsible for doing in the community, and influencing the community in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. So if you've got somebody who's willing to go spend some time to go look at old minutes and pull out tidbits of information and put together a chronology of the significant things your club has done, because that helps reinforce in your existing members the importance of the club and why it's important to belong and why it's important to continue to work. I want to get back to it, but I have to give up something else before I can get back to doing that.
Thank you, because that leads exactly to where GFWC is taking us next. It's called Preserving and Writing Your Club History. The other thing that they're asking us to do, and I can show this one to you because I have it up also. Make sure I have the right one. Yeah, here we go. It looks like this. They've written it all out for you step by step. It's on the GFWC. It's under WHRC. And then look at how cool. Can you guys see it? Do I need to make it larger?
No.
Okay. So it has this is exactly what's in the booklet. This is what the booklet looks at here. It looks like this: guidelines for writing your history. And you literally just walk it through. Identify the location, gather records, inventory and evaluate those records, organize records, sort and arrange the records, and describe the records. And then it says donating to clubs to historical. So if you are a historical club or your club building is a historical club, get on the list so that you can get grants and loans for your building. You guys, there is so much money out there if you're on that historical list. So then researching and writing the club history, questions to consider. So let's kind of go down and look at this, because a lot of this identifying, there we go, record, gathering. Look at all this information that they give us on how to do this. It's an absolute incredible guideline on how to make this happen. sort and arrange your records. How many of us have a shed with all of our records in it, right? So what if we digitalize them? What if there's so many I have this woman in Colorado that works with my mom. We're doing our history, our family history. You send her a box and she digitalizes everything. She charges $15 an hour. So find someone that can do this for you. Hire a high school kid. They are really good at this kind of stuff and they can do it on their phones. You can scan on your phones now. So figure out how to digitalize it and then put it as part of your story. Tell a little bit every month. All right. And then the records and make them available, donating to your history. So let's go down to what questions to consider when writing your club history. So this is always the fun part, right? So when and where was the club founded? What did the club change its name over the years? I know we had to add the GFWC to ours. Did the club build or donate a library or a library collection? I know the CFWC donates to the library all the time. One of the largest libraries in California. I don't know if you guys know that, but we've been going through our history and putting it into the actual documentation at the library so that our history will always be part of the history of California. Because believe it or not, we are a lot of how California started, all of our clubs. So they are coming to us and requesting our history. All right, so then where are the club archives located and the history of the club's headquarters? Did the club participate in hosting the International GFWC convention? So these are all look at this, isn't this amazing? And all of this can be part of that. And I think when you talk to your members about why do we have to do minutes and why do we have to do reports? It's right here, guys. It's right here. It tells your history. And I say this, but I don't think they realize how important that is. All right. Now I want to stop sharing because I've been talking enough. This is your turn. I want you to bring forward a project that you've seen in Women's History or WHRC that has worked in some way or form that we could implement into our clubs. And I said, go ahead, bring it to the table, share it with us. Does anyone have anything that you've seen through the years that's worked really well? Yes, Linda.
Before I was president, I've been doing the newsletter for quite a while. And one thing I started doing, and I'd like to get back to it when I'm not president anymore, is to interview members of the club. And I have a list of questions to ask them. They answer them, they get with me, we put together an article, they send me a picture of themselves, and I put one of them in the newsletter each month. What was interesting, BJ Mouse is one of our members. Come to find out, she grew up in Ohio or Iowa or something, and she was a corn queen. And she had a picture of her crown and in a nice fancy dress. Oh my gosh, that was the most popular article that everybody loved it. Did you know this about BJ? And it's just was helping us to get to know each other. I did about 4 of them. I would choose somebody that had been there a while. Then I chose a new member so we could get to know that person. And I want to get back to that if it is of any value.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
absolute value.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And
But-
you know, like this one lady walked up to me, she goes, I have to show you something. And I had known her for years. And she brings out this tattered little picture and it was absolutely adorable. And she's in a bunny costume. And I'm like, okay, where are we going with this? And she used to work at the Playboy Mansion as a bunny server.
Oh,
And she was
cute.
in her
That's
little
funny.
bunny outfit and it was in like the a long time ago. And it was like the satin. Do you guys remember the satin ones with the big
Mhm.
ears? And I was like,
And
girl.
they were completely covered up,
Yeah.
but cute as anything.
Yeah. And she goes, let me show you the bunny dip. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so she showed us how to do the bunny dip. You guys, we all have a story, right?
Yeah.
And instead of seeing it as bragging, we need to have fun with it. What if you just open the floor up and engage one table to tell a story of one of their members one time a month and just allow us to enjoy each other and each other's history, right? And then
Yeah.
just celebrate each other. That's what Women's History Month is about. So I commission you to figure out a way to show every single member somehow in the month of March something that they've done that you could pull out, history that you have, people that have gone before you. Go around and figure this out and have fun, celebrate each other. Abby, Miss Abby, I know. Hi, Abby. What would you like to share?
Well, first of all, I have really, really enjoyed this. I like to listen to LeVar Burton's editorials, and he is a storyteller. Debbie, I congratulate you. You are right up there. Just
Thank
the
you.
voice and listening to the story was so engaging. Thank you very much. And I have learned a lot. I
Thank you.
am a member of the Diamond Bar Women's Club. We do have Claudia Maidenberg, who is Women's History Chairman there. And she came up with, we took just, like a church flag, and she pasted on the front of it the history of just only 5 flags she used, those fans. And she would put a selected woman in history. And then on the other side, she would put the history of one of the club members. She did not name them. And you had to go from table to table, and there was a number on the handle. And if it was number 5, that person had to step into place, seated at that chair, and become that person. Tell that full story. Read what was on the front of the fan. And then the flag was passed around, or not flag, the fan was passed around the table, and you guess who the member was that was on the other
Good
side.
idea.
Oh,
Okay.
I
That's a
love
cool
that
idea.
Do you have it
Yay.
written? Can you share it with us at some point? Can you send it to me? Even write it
I
up?
can, yes, we
Oh.
learned so much about different members that were there. We looked at them every month and had no idea. It's kind of like the corn, princes. We had no idea. So it's a fun thing that kept us, learning the history. And we would rotate. We've done this project for 2 years, and it's been in rotation, and we can't get rid of it because everybody looks forward to it.
I love it. Think about we have doctors and lawyers and business people that are all retiring now, right? And as you retire, it's not always easy to disappear. Have you ever noticed as you get older, you kind of just disappear a little bit more, right? You don't get asked the question. Don't let our members go through that. Celebrate them, find them. Abby, what a great idea. And it's so simple. It's like just going to the dollar store and putting a face on a fan and recognizing that member immediately and making a difference in their life. They're going to be so privileged that you took a minute out of your busy, busy day and noticed them, right?
Yes.
What a great idea. All right, Kathy, what are you up to, Kathy?
I just have a question for Abby. What did you call that project? A fan of women's history? Or, I mean, that is what?
We called it the past and the present of women's history.
Okay.
And the was the same part of women in history. The present was the members.
Okay. So back again, you had 2 fans. One was the woman in history that passed, and then the other one was the fan of a member, right?
Yes.
And
Sonja said you go to the Dollar Tree and they have those little fans that you can buy. And we just did it simple paper and then just taped them side by side so that we didn't have to keep replacing the fans. Each year we would remove the old and replace them with whatever we were doing the following year.
That's a fantastic idea. Thank you.
All right,
You're welcome.
Someone else has to have ideas. Come on, guys. Everyone has done this. We've been here for some time. What other ways do you show the history of the club in a fun way? Are you feeling like we have ideas to go forward? We're commissioning. Oh, yes. Kathy, go ahead.
Which one? Me?
Yes, please.
There's both of us right there. I know last year, and I did the report for our club. The program chair, which she's also the president of the Rialto Historical Society, what she did is she invited women from the fire department, from the police department, from our school district leaders in the school district, and then one of the first women business owners in Rialto. And we honored them, and I think they all got a chance to talk a little bit. That was really one of our coolest meetings because they were people in our community, and some also happened to be members of our club. But I really thought that was a neat idea, and that was our program. So, but man, I want to do what Abby was doing. I think that's a fantastic idea. I really
Well,
like
you know,
it.
the one thing we have to remember is if you keep it doable, you'll keep doing it. And sometimes we make things so complicated, people can't finish them. My goal is to teach you tricks and tips to get it done today, right? So
Yeah.
that you don't, yes, the club history may take a few moments, but if you break that list down, you could get a little bit done every month at a meeting and everyone can help you and learn. Kathy.
I am fortunate that I live in a small community that still has a community newspaper. And we have a new member in our club who is a former journalist, and she gets all kinds of press releases. We just recently got the front page of the newspaper because somebody was on vacation and they were able to slip it in. But we're saving our club history that way. But not only that, our club was established in 1915, I think. Yeah, because this year's our 120th. And we had all of the yearbooks and the minutes and the scrapbooks were all stored at our clubhouse.
Wow.
And so we spent 2 summers ago, we had everything out on tables in the clubhouse and we sorted it by decade. And then we put them in archival boxes. And we're very fortunate that our historical society at the Tuolumne County Museum was willing to take them and store them for us, so that we have access to them, but they're in a safe place because our clubhouse is wood, and if it burns, those all go down. But also, the Historical Society has a quarterly newsletter called the Chispa, and their last issue was totally 100% the history of the Oronos Research Club. And so we have that in writing from start to where we are now, and the Historical Society put it out, but one of our club members wrote it. And our club president, as she was going through all the archives, she was reading the minutes and she was absolutely amazed at what these women back in 1915, 1920, 1930, 1940 were able to accomplish. The city of Sonora said, you need a sidewalk in front of your building here, but you have to pay for it. Those ladies went out. I don't know what they did, but they raised the money and they paid for the sidewalk. So as far as we're concerned, that's our sidewalk and we can do what we want with it. You know? But
Yeah.
These ladies did amazing things back when ladies didn't have the rights, the access to, or the really the ability to do what we can do now, and we don't do a fourth
Yeah.
of what they did.
Mhm.
So that I'm just fortunate. I have a club president who wants to preserve the history. I have a community. We are no longer the best kept secret in Sonora. And as far as we're concerned, Oronos is not Sonora backwards. Sonora is Oronos backwards.
That's great. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I just didn't wrap up. There's 3 things I'd like you to know about. Okay. So there is a WHRC pin and tote. So the WHRC was formed in 1984, and the GFWC celebrates 40-year anniversary with a launch of a special logo that features a gavel, a Jennie June silhouette, and even Mildred Madame Hawkins trademark glasses. That's cool. So maybe you could do your history of a person, and then at the end of the year, celebrate that person with this very cool thing. Proceeds all go to WHRC. Okay, so WHRC actually has a building. They actually have accumulated our club and our histories, and we send them pictures, and there's all kinds of things that we have done in the GFWC for many, many years. It's in Washington, D.C. It's 1734 North Street Northwest. So if you're headed up to Washington, D.C., not only go to the original house that we help support, and you can stay there for free if the president is there. And then go to WHRC and go research your club and your district and your state and see what we have there, because there's thousands and hundreds of thousands of things that we have there. All right, so
Mhm.
tours, research hours are between 10 and 4, so that you guys can kind of plan around that. Now, there is an online catalog. So the primary goal is to allow you to have access to whatever history is in your area that you want to share. So you can look at this paperwork that I'm sending out to you, and there's a telephone number, and there's also WHRC@gfwc.org, and you guys can go try it, and you can find information to present at your club or district or state. And you can call the librarian. She's wonderful, you guys. The new librarian is incredible. And you could say, what do you have for Palomar District, and how can we supplement it with more information? What do you have for Bonsall Women's Club? Can we supplement it with more information? And she'll tell you what she has and ask you for more information. And then you can send all that to her, okay? And they're working really hard. That's why they hired a full-time librarian to get everything digitalized so that we can share this information more often. All right. So do you feel like you have enough information today?
Oh, yes.
Wow, lots.
Mhm.
Okay,
Lots.
good. All right. Let me go ahead and turn off the recording.